Let's talk about Nigeria's current economic challenges as Nigeria continues to grapple with insecurity and economic woes, including the instability of the country's currency. Political experts and opposition party have called on the APC-led government to find a way out of the current situation by seeking help, calling on professional directions, or simply step down. Our guest today will be looking at the current situation Nigeria faces and a possible way forward.
Well, our guest is a professor of political institutions and comparative politics at the Department of Political Science of the Usmanu Danfodio University, Sokoto. His broad area of research interest includes, but not limited to, democracy and democratization, political institutions, and violent conflicts. Well, let's bring on our guest. I'm sure you've seen him already, Professor Yahaya Baba. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right. It feels good to know that you have majored in concerns and also in study of what political conflicts, political institutions, democratization, or democracy should actually look like. But I'd like to beg of your opinion this morning. What do you make of the current state of Nigeria's democracy? Just would like you to be plain with us. What do you make of Nigeria's democracy? We just talked about the Edo State elections. I'm sure you're also aware of what took place just a few days back, where a political party produced 3 candidates for its primaries, and now we're seeing PDP produce 2 candidates. Looking at everything, how we got here, what do you make of Nigeria's democracy?
This is a crisis-ridden democracy. You know, it's a burden democracy. We call it emerging democracy, but of course we are not learning from past, sharp best practices. That has to do with procedures, with processes, with best practices, with rules, with regulations that are embedded in democratic processes of governance. And, the institutions in Nigeria's democracy are the key challenges to deepening democracy, to consolidating it, to ensuring that democracy actually works for the citizens. So beginning with parties, which are the most important building blocks of democracy. The whole crisis with Nigeria's democratic governance has been, to start with the political parties. The political parties play major, important, essential role of mobilizing the people, of engaging the people, of articulating, ideas upon which the country is to be governed in terms of manifestos, in terms of manifestos translating into policies after winning elections, in terms of even galvanizing, the national consciousness of the people in terms of keying in into the national discourse to determine what the future of the country will be in terms of governance, in terms of intervals within election cycles, and so on and so forth. But if you look at the structure of political parties in Nigeria, you hardly can figure out. In the last 20 years or even more, 2 decades of Nigeria's democratic practice, you cannot, differentiate between the major political parties that have governed this country. Boundaries are not well established. Ideas are not, do not seem to trail what the symbols and the symptoms of these very particular political parties are. You cannot even differentiate between those who are in APC today, or who are in PDP, or who are in the defunct AMPP, or the AD, or the ACN. You can't realize that they are the same set of political elites that are actually, moving from one platform to another platform, and they're recycling themselves in these platforms and reproducing themselves in government at subnational levels, at national levels, without recourse to what ideas drive them, as political elites to seek for power, and of course what to do with such power. The eminent lack of consensus, elite consensus, if you like, in Nigeria's democratic process, define the current realities and the crisis Nigeria is facing with that of governance. If you look at the current, challenges of Nigeria in terms of even organizing party platforms as national institutions that will drive the process of governance forward and deliver the goods that are expected of it, there's nothing to write home about. Just spoke about what is happening in Edo State today. APC had 3 parallel, primary elections. One party a party that is usually, that governs at the center, party that has national leadership, party that has been in place in governance for more than 8 years, a party that has won election just recently, not organize itself entirely.
Professor, I mean, you have said that. You've said something that many of us can agree with, that there's really not a lot of difference, demarcation between the two leading political parties. It feels like both of them are different sides of the same coin. How do Nigerians, ordinary Nigerians who are tired and want a change and want politics to run as it should be, is there a possibility that Nigerians can ever conquer the system of politics in Nigeria that currently exists? Because if I decide today that I'm tired of seeing all the things that I'm seeing in Nigeria's policy and I want to step in, it feels like we're already defeated and you don't have a choice but to run with the major political parties. Is there a way that we can get out of running in these circles?
Yeah, there's just the most practical, way in which we can address and respond to this challenge is grassroots mobilization and ownership of political parties, institutions like political parties. And we have had instances most recently where we have seen the people stepping up to take over control and ownership of a platform, of a political party platform. What has transpired in Kano State, for instance, the just concluded election, shows clearly that party organizations are best managed, are best run if the people are actually directly involved in the ownership and management of party. And this can only happen where ideology drive the process of the formation of political party, and ideology also drive the process of ownership of political party, and ideology also drive the governance process after elections. And ideology also drive the process of engagement of political party even when it's not in government. We have seen what has happened in the 2019 elections when, so to say, the Confucian movement was in the People's Democratic Party, how the election was run, how they lost out, and how they reorganized themselves as a people to float, a party platform, a distinct party platform away from APC, away from PDP. And the massive votes this very particular party platform, attracted, both in the gubernatorial election and in the presidential election. The Kano enclave has a history, and that history of radical politics has actually come to play out even when we thought that there's complete death of radical and opposition politics in the country. But that remnant of radicalism in the political culture of the people of Kano actually re-emerged. And this was a saving grace for that very particular enclave. So I think the most important step we're taking is to ensure that political parties are built around ideologies. And not only that they are built around certain ideological leaning, but the mass of the people at the grassroots level take a center stage in the formation of political parties, in the organization of political parties, and in the way in which political parties are managed. Now you cannot even time in the register, the register of political parties. That is to say, the membership of political parties from the lowest level of the society to the highest level of the society. Right, and Professor, nobody feels very strong about his membership of a political party.
All right, Professor.
And everything is.
All right, Professor. We've looked at Nigeria, but then again, we've also seen that there seems to be a disparity between the current ruling party and, of course, the opposition parties. But then again, someone once said that it seems it's in the air. African leaders would like to hold on tight to power, and they will do whatever it seems for them to get that power and remain in power, which has led to conflicts, coup, and of course, we've seen a lot of upheavals in different parts of the continent. But would you say that the thoughts of other African leaders in other African countries, from Cameroon to Niger Republic, which we've seen what happened, down to Guinea, where power is the major trophy? Are we starting to see that happen in Nigeria now, where people must win at all costs just because they want to grab hold of power and remain there? We know what it has cost in other countries. From Guinea to Burkina Faso, I mean, you could name them. Would you say that the similar incident or similar thought of I must grab hold of power and stay there is what we're starting to see here in Nigeria?
Yeah, it's something quite slightly different from what obtains in other climes. In Nigeria, I don't think that this mindset of, say, remaining in power beyond, the constitutionally, designed period of tenureship of a particular government. But then these issues of election, winning election at all costs, mismanagement and squandering the goodwill at party levels. And of course, unfavorable policies or policy decisions that are taken by government will actually produce results similar to what we have seen in Guinea, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in other countries. Nigeria has actually grown so big and mature to say that, the issue of sit-tight leaders, the issue of tenure extension, the issue of prolongation of one in power cannot be contemplated by any political leader at this moment. But of course, when it comes to election period or election cycle, there's this tendency that parties in power will want at all costs to reimpose themselves back to power. And this has the tendency to degenerate the society into chaos, into crisis, and into what could be seen happening in other parts of African countries. And that mad rush and blind, urge for power by African elites has actually rubbished the beauty of democracy and the promises of democracy in the continent of Africa. And Nigeria is no exception. We have seen what has happened in the last elections. We have seen the excessive monetization of the electoral process and the electoral environment. We have seen the use of force. We have seen violence that have actually ravaged the process of election. We have seen the tension that actually greeted the elections in the last election. We have seen how Nigerian populace become deeply divided, across, parochial cleavages in terms of religion, in terms of clan, in terms of tribe, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of region, and Nigeria has not recovered from that very particular, from those conflicts that actually trailed the elections in the and that explains why, the Nigerian government is actually not comfortable with this spread of coups all around it, because the tension in the country, the complete lack of satisfaction with the way in which the affairs of the country is being run by political elites will has already sent shockwaves to government, and that explains why this drastic measure of expelling and not expelling of containing and sanctioning Niger Republic, Mali, and Burkina Faso, because of the military seizure of political power in the neighboring countries. And now it has also translated into a huge political crisis for the sub-region. And the exit of these three countries is actually spelling doom for the West African sub-region, and is also undermining Nigeria's power potential as the country with the most elephantic position in the West African sub-region. So in Nigeria, this unregulated, fierce, stiff, and confrontational, competition for power by the political elites is likely to degenerate the country into chaos, into upheavals, into instability, and perhaps we may not suggest that coup will happen in Nigeria, or military seizure of political power will happen in Nigeria, but the worst the military coup can happen.
Professor, Professor, then, you've really hit the nail on the head in terms of some of the end results we are likely to see if care is not being taken, especially with the way the government is being run. From your perspective and from your experience, what can this current administration do differently to steer us back in the right direction? Or would you say that things are going as they should in terms of Nigeria's economy and the policies that have been instituted ever since this current administration came into office? So I think it's a two-part question. Do you think that we're on the right course? If not, what do we need to steer ourselves right back?
We are just not on the right course. Things have never been, as tough as they are now. Two hasty policy decisions taken by government. Immediately after, you remember the Nigerian President Bola Tinubu announced the withdrawal of subsidy even before taking over the mantle of leadership. As soon as he has taken out of office, he announced the removal of subsidy. And that actually, drained the Nigerian economy. There is this argument that the subsidy is actually, undermining Nigeria's economic growth and development. But of course, removing subsidy or removal of subsidy should have been done, not in a very hasty way, but of course, in ways in which alternative framework is actually determined and built to ensure that the repercussions and the consequences of subsidy removal is actually, well articulated and of course beforehand taken care of. And this forex of a thing, floating the forex regime, into the market, and now not having full control of foreign exchange, and the excessive devaluation of the naira has also caused untold hardship and has affected and contracted the Nigerian economy so much so that production levels of the country have actually gone a record low in the country, which affects not only the survival of industries and factories in the country, but is directly affecting the livelihood of an ordinary Nigeria. We have hyperinflation, so to say. Prices are completely out of hand. We have shortages of basic staple foods. We have, in addition to the crisis of insecurity and conflict that have actually affected food production in the country, now the whole Nigerian society is thrown into huge uncertainty, insecurity, and particularly provision and availability of food, which actually created tense situations. We have seen sporadic, so to say, protests, uprisings, if you like, from one part of the country to another, even though the government is trying as much as it can to ensure that things are under control, but you cannot control a population that is hunger-ridden. And that the government needs to actually evolve and think of knowledge-driven policies that in the short run will actually be seen to address the concerns of the ordinary citizens of the country. You have to actually make provision for alternative, policy measures that will attend to the crisis of people's livelihood, while at the same time, projecting right into the future and making sure that the economy is not overburdened by policies that actually benefit.
All right, Professor Tanko. We've gotten your points, but just for the benefit of our viewers to indeed get a true sense of what the direction you are proffering is, I'd like to ask you, as a professor who has indeed followed constitutionally and internationally, you have thought, you have read, you have been able to dissect politics both at the international level and, of course, Pan-African level. What are three things you think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu-led administration can do from today? Three things, just three of them, that you think they can do from now, today, that would at least ameliorate the suffering of Nigerians, or better still, mitigate and proffer a better solution in his administration going forward? Three.
One basic thing that needs to be done is to address this looming crisis of food insecurity. This has no option, and Nigeria is full of potentials. What needs to be done is to revolutionize the agriculture, and this can be done within the shortest possible time. The government can actually flood the agricultural sector with inputs, with finances, with equipment that the citizens can go into production 3 cycles in a year. And this can be done within this season. And if this is done, remember, the previous administration, regardless of what it has done, in policy abuses, had actually saved this country during COVID-19 because of the massive rice production through anchor growers that actually made sure that the country did not rely on the importation of basic staple foods during the COVID lockdown. And this is because farmers have actually gone into farming 3 cycles within a year. This can be done. And there are certain basic foods, crops, that if the government invested hugely in the production of these crops, rice, maize, cassava, these are 3 crops, beans, and other crops, that if there is intervention from government for the production of these very particular important grains, the economy will actually pick up again. There is this issue of forests and mismanagement of the national resources. Where are the process of the sale of crude oil? Where are there no remittances into the central bank? Where are we having strategies of dollar? Why is the economy now increasingly being dollarized? Why is the national currency, the naira, not becoming a medium of exchange in the hands of political elites? There should be law that actually forbid or criminalize the use of any currency other than naira in Nigeria. And this is key to ensuring that the value of naira is actually regained. This is a practical step that, if taken, the country will actually be brought back on its own feet, and the economy will actually pick up. Then, thirdly, and more importantly, the government needs to show seriousness in its fight against corruption.
All right.
And the confidence, yes, this is confidence on the government in the management of public resources under the care of government must be seen. Government must show commitment and zero tolerance to corruption. These things are done, the country will pick up.
Prof, I think my final question would be: are there any, those who call for the president to resign if he's not sure of what he's doing in office? Is there any sense to those that are making those calls? And also, when the current administration says that the opposition is sort of sabotaging this administration, is there sense to that argument as well?
Well, we have had this very particular argument even in the past administration. If there is anything in the resignation, they need to create more problems than solving problems. Resign for the president to resign, for his vice president to take over, or for the president and the vice president to resign, for the senate president to take over. What will be the solution? For another election to be called, for an emergency period to be declared? More troubles. What we need in the government that is constituted with the so-called mandate of the people, be brought to book, be held accountable for its actions and inactions. And the president and the government have the chance to actually listen to the general public and also to assemble experts. I think the major crisis with governance in Africa is that political leaders don't seem to value knowledge in the process of governance. That policies are chosen not on the basis of facts, not on the basis of figures, not on the basis of credible information and such findings, but policies and governance are taken to be a guesswork. That is why the very motivation of the Nigerian people, particularly on Bola Ahmed Tinubu's government and his capacity to run the country, is particularly what he achieved in Lagos, relatively better than his peers at the time he ran Lagos. And this was largely as a result of the team he assembled. But we're seeing something completely different when he was sworn in as a president. We haven't seen those experts he assembled in Lagos to form a very robust cabinet. We haven't seen those advisors from the industry, technocrats, from the academics and all that. The team he assembled in Lagos that preferred solution to most dreadful, economic and security challenges that Lagos faced in the last in the last 2 decades. We haven't seen that. People thought that Bola Tinubu will do the magic of responding to Nigeria's crisis, likely because he, as a person, has the capacity to do that. But because his pragmatic approach to governance, particularly in assembling experts and surrounding himself with capable and strong-minded people who are in a position to offer solutions to the crisis of the economy.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time for this conversation, Professor, but you've highlighted points. So I'm hoping that the current administration is taking notes and that we can have brighter days and better days when next we have this conversation about Nigeria and where we are. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.